Welcome back to another Conversations in History. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We are lucky enough to have with us today a 2021 inductee of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association, Cranbrook'S Charlie Shaw. First of all, Charlie, I wanted to congratulate you on being elected and going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I think it's worthy of all the work you've done, and I appreciate you joining us to spend a little time talking about your background.
Thank you, Greg. I went through several stages of disbelief, and then got my head around this and realized what a great feeling, what a great invitation to look back over an incredible, basically 2-3 decades of lacrosse in the cradle stage here, and it's exciting, and it's a terrific honor. So thank you.
When you get the call, I think it's the idea of all those rainy days you spent on a practice field and all the phone calls you got from parents that maybe were not exactly happy with you. And it just kind of makes a calming effect that you knew that maybe all the work was worth it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So many of the images that you have, you lose the scoreboard, but what you have is you're hunched over a kid, who can't move. You are talking to a parent. You're holding your hands in your armpits because your hands are about to fall off. Yeah, it's incredible. It's an incredible set of memories.
Now, you've been at Cranbrook for over 40 years. And what I want to do is I want to take you all the way back to the beginning, which is for you, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And let's start from, I don't know if we want to go all the way back to the crib, but let's maybe go back to high school and talk a little bit about your background, your athletic background, and where you're from and kind of where it started.
Sure. I was lucky enough to go to a wonderful school called Petty School in Hightstown, New Jersey, where I was a soccer player and a track athlete. And in '68, Dietrich von Schwertner, a great coach, arrived and began to put some boys together with this funny cage and sticks. And I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I went to then to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. I saw nothing of lacrosse there, and became lucky enough to become a teacher in a prep school out in Western Connecticut, Kent School. And after I had told the headmaster that I could no longer coach the ski team because I didn't know how to ski, and I said I wasn't qualified to advise the Youth Carillon Society. He said, "Well, what the hell? You're sure as heck going to be coaching lacrosse." I said, "Okay," and that's how a lot of coaches got started. And I learned, to throw and catch alongside kids. So I'm applying for a job out, to get out of my starting position there, which is a good idea when you're, my age,
right?
To lose that beginning. And I was clever enough to identify on my resume that I was an assistant varsity coach of lacrosse and a dorm master, and had a real streamlined academic resume. But the thing I knew would catch their eye was, oh, this guy coaches lacrosse and he can live in a dorm. So that's when Cranbrook started in '76, and '77. The athletic director said, here is Rick Bays. I want you to meet Rick Bays. He coaches the varsity team here, and there are certain times where he might not be able to get to practice, and he might be late for practices, which I didn't realize was that he had to miss days at a time, and I stopped looking at my watch and realized, so this is all under my watch. And Rick did a great job, really inspired the players, but we needed somebody inside, and so I was the JV coach for a couple of years, became the varsity coach in '78 until they found, a really great coach in Tom Gracer. And so I was a JV coach with Tom and a number of other great coaches until I transitioned in 1992. So a great long coaching career that spanned 3 decades, but 16, 17 years.
Let me take you back a little ways. Did you always knew you wanted to be a teacher?
No, I painted myself into various kinds of corners as best I could, so that all I could do was say, well, I'll take this or that, and discovered that I was a teacher, and learned that teaching in the classroom and teaching on the field were really part of the same organism for kids. And
in that road that you were of discovery you were going down, I'm just curious, if you weren't a teacher, if you didn't make that decision then, what would you be doing now? Have any idea?
I'd probably be, I have no idea what I would be doing now. I would probably be dead if I wasn't a teacher.
Okay. I won't even explore that, but okay.
Teaching saved my life.
It's your blood, right? Is that fair to say?
That's right. Yeah.
So sometimes at an early age that there's a path that you're going to take, and maybe for you it was a little more complicated in terms of taking that route.
That's right.
Now you're fortunate enough that your experience at Kent now they had boarders at Kent, because obviously you had some experience as a dorm director, correct?
Kent was completely boarding. Cranbrook is in the Midwest, where boarding schools are quite unusual.
Right.
I brought boarding experience, and that living among the guys really pushed my roots as a coach down, because the trips that you would make in those days were to the Interstate League, what we call the Interstate League. And our first schedules included the Lance Cruise teams. There were no Catholic teams in 77, 78, Country Day. And then we went, to Shady Side. We went to Sewickley in Pittsburgh area. We went to Western Reserve in Cleveland. We went to Upper Arlington, Worthington, and being in a dormitory, being able to get the kids out of, bed, and be happy to put them in a van and drive them to Columbus or to Pittsburgh. That was a huge difference in terms of just attracting kids into the program.
My recollection is that the only schools in Michigan that have dormitories, and I coached at one of them, that was Orchard Lake St. Mary's, and I think Cranbrook. I believe those are the only 2 schools in Michigan that have overnighters. I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. There are a couple of smaller kind of boutique niches,
right?
But you're right. That's it.
What was your degree in, and what did you teach? What in the early days?
English teacher, and taught soccer alongside lacrosse for years and years, and had a great parallel career as a soccer coach, and able to call out some great soccer players as well as great lacrosse players that came through.
As a retired journalist, I have to ask you an English question. I was fortunate enough to have gone to parochial school, and my grammar was better in the 9th grade than some people that I worked with in college that had master's degrees.
That's right.
Have we lost, and I say this just as a parochial question, have we lost the structure sentences and the grammar that goes with the things? Do we teach the grammar the way we should be teaching it anymore? or is it just sort of fractured to a point where we don't necessarily pay attention to the actual structure of the language?
No, we've always known that grammar was an evolving thing. All you have to do is, pick up Shakespeare or Chaucer and realize, oh, that's not any grammar that I recognize. But the pace of change in grammar has accelerated. And you're right, the grammar that you learned, the grammar that I learned, which had a right and wrong to it. I mean, you definitely had correct grammar and you had incorrect grammar. And now you've got like grammar light.
Yeah. I take a right-hand turn, but you're an English teacher, so I sometimes once in a while I ask a question just for my own edification. Now, you talked about Cranbrook in 1976. There's been some conversation. You and I talked previously about there was a sort of a quasi lacrosse program at Cranbrook in the late 60s, early 70s. It wasn't official until 76, but maybe explain what the program was. I think you mentioned that it was sort of out of the back of somebody's car. And I mentioned that because we always know that Don Lutz at L'Anse Creuse started the first program in 76, but even Mike Jolly, who then was at Chippewa Valley, had talked about, he had a picture of his lacrosse team in a yearbook. And the reason I'm asking the question is that, as we explore these conversations, we're finding out more and more. So maybe lacrosse wasn't necessarily started in 76. Maybe pick up on that.
Yeah, well, you had some kids who had the bug of lacrosse in this school in the 68, 69, 70. Paul Cragen was the individual. He was class of 68. He's the same age as I am. We lost him, unfortunately, sadly. But he converted kids and was like our best kids, able to bamboozle a faculty advisor into becoming a sponsor or coach. And like me, these early, like many of the early coaches, like Gene Riley over at Country Day, just really eager to help the kids out and impressed by their energy. So yeah, that's how Cranbrook got started until and they would play in an interstate league as well, because there was nothing in Michigan when they started their first games.
One of the questions I actually had a chance to ask Don Lutz, I said, you're putting a program together of lacrosse because you had played at Ohio University. And I asked him, I said, did it ever occur to you at any point that there was no one to play because you're the first team? And he had to stop and think for a second. It really never dawned on him. He says, putting the team together was one thing. And of course, they went out and they played college teams and they played men, adult teams and the rest of it. And so the joke kind of was, when we were talking, could you imagine going to your athletic director today saying, by the way, we want to start whatever sport it might be. And but by the way, we're going to play college teams and club teams and a variety of guys. The liability assurance alone would put your athletic director's hair on fire. I always found that to be kind of cool because there wasn't anybody to play at that point.
Yeah, it was maybe a couple of. Well, L'Anse Creuse was always on our schedule. I think we were playing L'Anse Creuse, in the first years of Don's experience, and Country Day picked up lacrosse. I think Gene Riley was the originator of lacrosse at Country Day. He was a fine gentleman.
Have you ever thought or taken the time to think about how a Native American sport became one of the staples in a prep school landscape? versus maybe a public school landscape? I've never wondered about that. Now you come from the East Coast, you went to Kent, you obviously ended up at Cranbrook. I mean, it was always thought of, and now it's a mainstream sport, but in those days, it really was a prep school sport. And I wonder any thoughts on the metamorphosis of that? I've never asked that question, but it kind of dawns on me that that's accurate. And you're a guy that was involved in two schools that did that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think that the answer lies in in the geography of the game, and the fact that the game had its origins, in the first American populations, pushed out through Western New York, through New Hampshire, through Dartmouth, through Long Island, and it's always, prep schools that are most porous and most fertile in terms of starting and stopping. There's a nimbleness there, and so a quickness to embrace. And in a lot of these schools, football was one of the sports, but football was not the sovereign sport in a lot of these prep schools, and football had its foot on the brake for lacrosse for years, and in prep schools, you couldn't put your foot on the brake like that.
Yeah, you mentioned you had you sort of started as a soccer player and a track athlete. Did the speed obviously helps in any sport, but did the soccer and understanding spatial relations? You mentioned when you started, you literally had to pick up a stick and learn how to catch and pass with your kids.
Yeah.
So that's true in a lot of cases. You pick up a book. I've mentioned a couple of times, somebody asked me in California if I could help out with lacrosse, and I asked where the rink was. And of course there was no rink. It was a field, and you had to adjust. And in the library, there was no, better book for dummies, for lacrosse. There just didn't exist. So you pick up, and catching is catching and passing is passing. But my question is, does soccer have a quicker learning understanding of the spatial relationship to it? And then the second part is, and this is just kind of a personal question, did you get more respect the better you got as a player? And I say that as being able to catch and pass, because all of a sudden here's your coach, and he's fumbling with a stick, and maybe a couple of years later you look like you really know how to play the game. Was there any as you got better, did it help with your kids?
Yeah, so funny that you should ask that question. There's no doubt that there's a ramping up over the career. That's true with all teaching. Teaching is a skill that just enriches over the years, and there is no mastery of teaching. The best teachers, the best coaches, just continue to deepen. And it was definitely in my first years of coaching, it was a 1 week ahead of the kids kind of scenario, and making sure that I was able to spend as much time around people like Rick Bays, Gene Riley. I'd call up Gene over at Country Day. Gene was a football coach, and the kids talked him into being a lacrosse coach. They did me too. And so I'd call up Gene, who'd been there for a couple of years before I had, and Gene would say, look, here's all the things that I know. And he would pull his mimeograph drills out of his briefcase and say, here, take these, Charlie. And he would take me through all of the moves, and said, this is how I break them down. And that was a terrific act of kindness. And then in answer to your other question, as I came to understand the game, I realized that soccer had much more a resemblance to lacrosse than I ever thought. You don't kick things a whole lot. You see soccer players on a lacrosse field. They're doing they can kick some amazing things.
Yes.
Do some amazing things.
Yes, they can.
And it's so fascinating to see soccer players become lacrosse players. All the lacrosse players were immigrant, players. That is, it was lacrosse as a second language. They brought, soccer habits. They brought football habits. They brought ice hockey habits, and learned. When I was starting, you didn't have dads introducing kids. But in answer to your question, soccer is a game of flow, and the more you understand soccer, the more you understand the importance of possession and flow. And as I became more understanding of the game of lacrosse, I realized how important it was to be able to understand how to apply patience to the game, how to apply possession, the importance of possession, and it also translates into the way you practice with kids. Lacrosse practice started as a form of regimentation with lines and things like that. And as I became more familiar with some great lacrosse coaches like Tom Gracer, who completely washed soccer and lacrosse together in so many ways. Lacrosse lacrosse practice became an undertaking that was all game driven, game simulation. You throw out the ball, and it was.
I'm a non-teaching coach, and I believe that teaching and coaching are as different as Ferraris and watermelons. And I say that because I come from a family of teachers, and I have great respect for the education classes the few that I took, unlike you who took many more than I did. But I also believe that coaching is the ability to use less words than more in terms of that process. The best writers are the guys that condense it down to simply saying, well, it's wet.
There you go.
Something that I was taught.
Yeah.
Is that a fair parallel between teaching and coaching? And I say that question because there's a lot of us that are not teachers, and that doesn't diminish our ability to reach kids or coach, but it really is a little bit different than being in the classroom. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a great statement. To excite kids, to become aspirational, to dream, you have to put it in front of them so that they will take it. And your mission is to simplify and to break things down. And a successful English teacher is somebody who starts with puts a banquet in front of the kids so that they can just pull things right off of a plate and they can partake in this. And same thing with being a successful coach. You learn how to celebrate everything that a kid tries. You learn how to celebrate celebrate effort and breaking things down into pieces, which is the secret of a successful JV lacrosse coach.
Right.
Is to be able to break a complicated game into pieces, and also to understand that what really succeeds is never skills, it's all temperament.
You were the head coach. You were the head coach from 76 to, I think, 78. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I was the head coach. I was assistant head coach in 76 and 77. I became head coach in 78.
And then stepped back to JV at some point.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about the idea of going, I don't want to say going backwards. That's not going backwards, but you're the head guy and now somebody asks you to take over the JV spot. It's one of the reasons that you're in the Hall of Fame, because the category you're going into is a contributor process of being a part of the Hall. That takes a great deal of strength as a person. I'm not sure, somebody said to me, by the way, I'm the head coach. I'm an A-type personality. I'm not sure I could go backwards. And that's just a personal thing. But I have such respect for that decision that you made, because I think the JV coach has to be stronger sometimes in terms of fundamentals and teaching than the varsity coach. Because if I'm a varsity coach, I want kids coming up that have the skills. So talk a little bit about the transition and just how important a JV coach is in a varsity program that's successful.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Greg. For me, the opportunity to welcome a great coach into the school was an understanding of the importance of the process between a school and its athletic program, and making sure that an athletic program, in this case lacrosse, had a permanent home in the school. And in this case, our opportunity was to bring Tom Gracer in 1980 into the school after he had a really wonderful career at in Western New York. I forget the name of the college that he played at, which is great lacrosse college. Will come to me in a second. But he was somebody who, for him, lacrosse was a family undertaking, and it had nothing. There's no vertical. There's no hierarchy to it, and he conferred a tremendous amount of respect upon me, and was very generous in terms of showing me how to become a better lacrosse player. For me, getting in front of the JV program had all of the rewards of coaching, and it had none of the negative pieces of the tremendous emphasis on outcomes and state championships and things like that. For me, the glory of it was to introduce kids, and as I have said in other settings, the great thing about Cranbrook lacrosse is that, and I think lacrosse in general, is that you don't have schools taking lacrosse players from one another. You don't have that like craziness. Lacrosse is in Cranbrook is a place where the kids learn about it in middle school. Now they learn about it in elementary school. The kids that I coached became the coaches, and so I coached a lot of great coaches, like John Giampetroni and Shane Lavery and Jamal, and they they give their kids lacrosse knowledge at their own. I did it at school. I was in the dormitory, and the kids who would come from Korea or California or whatever, they would pick up a lacrosse stick for the first time. And there's nothing more magical than seeing that. Whereas or somebody like Tom Gracer could spot, you know, all the ingredients. He could spot it immediately. He would take a guy like, I remember Kurt Schweibel, who was a great soccer captain. He put a stick into his hands in his senior year. I saw this happen many times. And Tom would say, this is a lacrosse stick, and that's the goal. Now learn the game. All state by the time they were finished in 1 year.
Charlie, how long did you coach the JV team?
Oh, 16 years.
Long time.
Yeah.
Is there more pressure to win at Cranbrook or at a private school than a public school?
You know, I think that in general, existence in the private school has a lot of inherent kinds of pressures in them, and it requires a strong coach to put the values in the right order. To be quite honest, those pressures in a private school can become destructive. They can be destructive of the educational values of a school, and there's a lot about the game, the athletic, landscape of the last 2 decades with kids playing one sport as opposed to 2 or 3 sports,
yeah.
and the craziness of gaining, recruitment at age 15 and age 16. I've seen that happen to our young women, our young men, and it pushes the sense of joy and the sense of discovery off. That's my belief.
Yeah, I used to suggest at St. Mary's when I was there that if you're from a public school, where I was most of my career, you get friends from the neighborhood, but when you go to a private school, you get friends from the state, the nation, or the world, and that's just because the diversity of the student body. That doesn't mean it's better or worse. It just means that sometimes it's context. It's an ability to see a bigger picture, and I think that's one of those things I think is a bit unique from the schools. And there's successful kids from the city, the suburbans, and from farms. Kids are successful, but I think sometimes the idea of that 2 or 3 sport athlete versus playing the one sport. 3 years ago, the NCAA finally decided in lacrosse that they were not going to allow NCAA Division 1, 2, or 3 coaches to recruit freshmen. Well, hockey and skiing may have the model where a kid plays hockey, and Cranbrook has a great hockey program. Kid goes off and plays junior hockey for a couple of years, doesn't get drafted. Now he comes back as a 20-year-old to a university, and he's ready to play college hockey as a man. And he's also much better equipped to make a decision about his future academically, because if he's going to college, then, sometimes we put 16-year-olds and say, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And then we wonder when they get confused. Some of us couldn't tie our shoes at 16. So it's a process. And I know that your Cranbrook has always been really good at making sure kids are involved in more than not to be so myopic and be involved in just a very small landscape of activity.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That is fair. We try very hard to do that. And we still have a fair number of kids who will do 2 or sometimes 3 sports. It's my regret that increasingly the athletic culture has removed all of the excitement and rewards for being multi-sport athlete.
I say that because we're doing a series of shows for a companion piece for the Hall of Fame, and I'm interviewing the best players in the PLL, the best coaches in the world, from Lars Tiffany to Jamie Monroe to, I'm talking with players like Eric Law and Matt Rambo and Rob Pennell, And they're the first ones to tell you if they were in a football sport, they'd be multimillionaires. And Rob Pennell still has to come home and do clinics. He's the best maybe one of the best 2 or 3 offensive players in the world. And he still has to do a lot of off-season work because he doesn't make enough money at lacrosse as in terms of just playing the sport. He makes less money than a 5-year, 10-year school teacher would be. So that's kind of extraordinary, but at the same time, it's real. And I think that's part of what that you have to teach that changes a little bit. It's got to be a bigger landscape. Last question. What do you like about Cranbrook? You've been there a long time.
What I love about Cranbrook, and it also penetrates right into this occasion of, this wonderful occasion of being inducted, and that is the opportunity to put kids right in front of discovering a passion, and the special attention that you can give to exciting a kid about a role or a skill that they never dreamed of, and take them away from the experience of getting in line. I don't know if you can get it.
We're good.
So yeah, what kids hate is being told to get in line and wait your turn. And being at Cranbrook it's never a wait your turn world. It's always here, take this and take that, and now show me what you can do while I get out of the way.
Well, listen, I wanted to thank you for the time. One of the things the committee decided was that it's obviously the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association. And the Hall of Fame needed to cover a variety of places, and I'll use the word founder as part of it. But if it wasn't for the backbones of a lot of guys that were not necessarily head coaches or careers, there's a lot of contributions that have come to make the sport the great sport 50 years later that it is now. And I think you're one of those guys. So I want to congratulate you on the time that you spend with us. I appreciate that very much. And Charlie, the guys that talked about you, we've never met, but the guys that talked about you during the induction meetings we've had over the last couple of months have such great respect for you, mostly as an educator, certainly as a coach. And I just wanted to say congratulations. And I think this is a great category because I think we need to do a great job of recognizing the body of lacrosse, not necessarily just the top end of the iceberg.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have joined you for this occasion, and it's a great honor, Greg. I thank you very much. Thank the association.